Okay, boys and girls, here I am again. Hello, I am Mr. Broussard, and we are going to finish today the science lesson that we started 2 days ago about fossils, right? Today, we are going to make sure that that learning target is perfectly learned, that we know exactly how to explain to our parents or our sister or brother or anyone that asks, hey, what do you learn in science? You can tell them exactly what you learn because you know that learning target perfectly. So let's take another look at it. I can formulate empirical questions that lead to accumulating evidence in order to show what fossils are and in order to learn from them. We will also be using evidence to support our explanations. That's our learning target, and that's what we have been doing. We have been collecting information, we have been asking questions, we have been reading articles, we have been watching videos to find out what fossils are. And I think we have a pretty good idea now, but we're gonna do one more article today, and we are going to go back. Remember those statements that you mark yes, that you check. Remember? Check. You remember that? We're going to go back to that today to confirm, because now that we have so much information, we will be able to confirm those sort of guesses, or those, what would that be? Those, not a guess, but those predictions that we made. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So for our last lesson, we looked at these fossils, we matched them with the animals, we talked about what we wondered and what we noticed about these fossils, and then we filled a document making some generalizations about fossils. Today, we want to read an article by Nusella. I would like you to open the document that says Nusella Fossil Article, and we are going to read it together, okay? So open that document. It looks like this. Got it? Got it opened? Let's read this article together. So it says Earth's Systems. What are fossils? By Encyclopedia Britannica, adapted by Nusella staff. Okay? So let's see. Let's go ahead and start reading. Fossils are the remains of ancient life that have been preserved in Earth's crust. Most people think of fossils as preserved bones or shells of ancient animals. However, there are many forms of fossils. Scientists have even found fossils of early forms of bacteria. Not all remains of living things become fossils. To form a fossil, an organism must be preserved soon after it dies. If it is not preserved, its tissues will quickly decay. Moist areas such as riverbed beds are good places for fossils to form. The most common fossils come from hard tissues such as shells, bones, and tree trunks. So from our past lessons, we've already learned that living organisms are not just animals, humans, but living things, plants, animals, and humans, right? Those are living organisms and decomposers. So if they're not decomposed, if an organism after it dies is not decomposed by bacteria or by fungi, then it could become a fossil. Let's continue reading. Soft tissues can become fossils if they are preserved quickly after the organism dies. Scientists have found fossil remains of thousands of organisms that lived in the past. Together, these fossils make up the fossil record. This is the main source of information about the history of life on Earth. But the fossil record does not include everything, because fossils form only under certain conditions. The record reflects just a small part of the organisms that have ever lived. So we have to remember that we've had so many organisms that lived in the past that we don't have fossils of. So we only have fossils of certain organisms. Okay, so we've had so many in the past. So only when the right conditions are present, fossils can form. And we are lucky today that we are able to find many fossils, but we are not able to find all the fossils from all the organisms that lived and died in the past. So let's continue reading how fossils form. There are several ways that fossils can form. One way is called permineralization. This begins when an organism dies in an area such as a wetland and its body is buried under layers of sediment. Sediment include materials like silt, sand, and gravel. Over time, more and more sediment presses down on the organism's tissues. The tissues are gradually replaced with minerals from the water that leaks through the sediment. Eventually, the remains become petrified or stone-like. This can take thousands to millions of years. Bones, teeth, shells, and tree trunks are generally preserved through permineralization. Casts and molds preserve a 3D impression of remains buried in sediment. Water moving through the sediment gradually dissolves the original tissue of the organisms. The mineralized impression of the organisms left in the sediment is called a mold. The sediment that fills the mold also becomes mineralized. In this way, the sediment recreates the shape of the remains. This is called a cast. Ancient sea creatures were commonly preserved as molds and casts. If you have to read that section again to make sure that you understand, go right ahead and read it, okay? You can pause the video at any time and just reread that section to make sure that you understand how fossils are formed. Let's continue reading. Trace fossils provide evidence of an organism's activity. Preserved footprints, trails, and nests are trace fossils. So these are things that we learn from fossils, right? Where they lived, what they used to do. Soft tissues may be preserved through carbonization. These include tissues such as leaves, stems, seeds, insects, and feathers. During carbonization, the remains are squeezed between two layers of rock. Chemical changes produce a print-like carbon film on one layer of rock. An impression of the remains occurs on the opposite layer of the rock. An object trapped inside a preserved material forms an inclusion fossil. Insects preserved in amber are examples of such fossils. They occur when insects become trapped in the sticky resin of a tree. Over time, the resin hardens into amber. I remember watching the movie Jurassic Park, and they had that there. I mean, of course, it was not real, but I wish that we could have had, right? So they had a mosquito trapped inside the amber, and then they extracted the blood to make sure that to create a dinosaur, or not to create it, to clone a dinosaur. Anyways, enough of Jurassic Park, and let's finish the article. The fossil record. The fossil record shows us what organisms looked like a long time ago. Many of these organisms are no longer alive today. The fossil record shows how the animals evolve over time from one animal into another. And in your article, you can see the fossil layers there. You see that in your article? Good. And now let's see what fossils can teach us. Scientists use fossils to learn about ancient organisms and the ancient world. Fossils provide evidence of ancient climate and ecosystems. They also show how the land has changed over time. For example, there are fossils of sea creatures high up in the Himalayas, Alps, and Rocky Mountains. This shows that these great mountains were once under the sea. So that's part of our learning target. What can we learn from the fossils, right? So what can we learn from the fossils? Answer that question. So they provide evidence of ancient climates and ecosystems. They also show how the land has changed over time. Okay, let's continue. Last paragraph. Some scientists study certain kinds of fossils. Paleozoologists study the fossils of ancient animals, while paleobotanists study the fossils of ancient plants. The fossil record helps paleogeographers study landforms. It shows them how Earth's geographical features have changed over time. Bunch of things that we can learn, huh? So many things that we can learn from fossils. So we have, on these lessons, we have examined fossils, we have watched videos, we have read articles, we have collected evidence, we have recorded evidence. I mean, we've done so much. And now I want us to go back to the first document that we use on the first lesson. It is a document titled Before and After Activity. Click on it and open it, please. Remember, it looked like this. And the before activity, you agreed or disagreed with the different statements, okay? Now we're gonna go right here to the after activity, and we're gonna check the statements one more time and see if we agree or disagree after we have studied our lessons, okay? So you do that on your own, and then we are going to do it together, okay? So pause the video. Okay, so fossils are footprints made by dinosaurs. We have to disagree because it's not only footprints made by dinosaurs, there are more. So now you have to write here for evidence, you have to write why that is not true. Let's go to the next one. Plants do not leave fossils. Well, we know that that is not true because plants do leave fossils. So now we have to disagree with that, and then you have to write the evidence of how you know. Fossils are all shapes and sizes. That is true. And you can write where you got the evidence from. Number 4, fossils can only be made by organisms that lived on land. Well, we know that is not true. Organisms on the sea as well. So, mark. 5, while some fossils are of the actual body of an organism, others are impressions left by the organisms. That is true because they also left footprints. Okay? So revise that and then write your evidence. Okay? And we have come almost to the end of this science lesson that has taken us 3 lessons to complete. Okay, so now we are going to do an assessment to show that we actually learned the target. Okay, and for that, you're going to click on the assessment document. So click on that, please, and open it. The assessment looks like this. Okay? So you are going to look at the picture of the different, the 3 images of different organisms and the one of the fossil, okay? You have to identify the type of organism that the fossil represents. You have to explain the patterns you observe to identify similarities and differences between the fossil and the organism, okay? You also have to explain why the other 2 organisms could not represent the fossil there, okay? So read that carefully, and then you have to write a paragraph explaining how that fossil is the remains of one of those organisms, okay? Just follow those bullet points there to complete your paragraph. So pause the video and do your assessment. And now that you have completed the assessment, we have come to the end of this science lesson about fossils. So we will look at the learning target one more time to make sure that we are able to answer it. I can formulate empirical questions that lead to accumulating evidence in order to show what fossils are and in order to learn from them. We will be using evidence to support our explanations. We have done exactly that by examining different fossils, by reading articles, by watching videos, and now we know what fossils are, what we can learn from them, and we can support our statements with evidence, our explanations with evidence. Thank you, boys and girls. Have a great day, and I will see you soon. Remember, science is everywhere. Bye-bye.